Well, God bless you. Segment 4, we're still in the year 2022, and we are starting the fight. The true God versus the Egyptian gods. And then you could call this part 1 because we're only going to get halfway through the plagues. So we start Exodus chapter 7, verse 1, and we read, "And the Lord Jehovah." Remember, Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord? Who is this Jehovah God you guys are talking about?" Well, yeah, he's about to find out. "And the Lord Jehovah said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god, or I've made you like a god, or like an oracle to Pharaoh. And Aaron thy brother, he's going to be your prophet." Now, the term God in this instance means power and authority. Moses was to be instead of God in transmitting divine messages to Pharaoh. Aaron was to act as a prophet in translating and interpreting Moses' words to Pharaoh. Moses, because of the power God granted him, would soon have great influence over Pharaoh and the Egyptians. All the people of the land would come to greatly fear and respect him. Verse 2, "Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he send the children of Israel out of his land. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart," or I will allow Pharaoh's heart to harden. "And though I multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh is not going to hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt and bring forth my armies." The Hebrew word for hosts is translated armies also. So basically, he's just talking about his people in general. So it should be hosts, but you'll see that with the word armies. And then we can omit the word "and" because it's an explanation. "You're going to bring forth my host, my people." This identifies who the hosts are. "My people, the children of Israel. And you're going to bring them out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. And the Egyptians shall know," oh, they'll know, "that I am the Lord Jehovah." I am the Lord Jehovah. I'm not just any god of the hundreds of Egyptian gods or people acting as gods like Pharaoh. The Lord went to war against the Egyptian gods. He's about to execute righteous judgment upon the gods of Egypt, along with their worshipers. The equivalence to this in the New Testament is the war the Lord fought and won against Satan through the accomplished, completed work of Christ. The prize in both contests was the people of God. In the Old Testament, the Lord delivers his people from the bondage of Egypt and Pharaoh, and today his people have been rescued from the bondage of the devil and his spirits. Exodus 12:12.
And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord.
And Knox's translation of that?
So I will give sentence on all the powers of Egypt.
Numbers 33:4.
Upon their gods also the Lord executed judgments.
And from the New English Bible?
Struck down by the Lord as a judgment of their gods.
Why was it so important to the true God to execute judgment on all the gods of Egypt? Why does he want to show the children of Israel their total ineffectiveness? Well, really, there's two reasons. The first was that they had never actually witnessed the power of the true God. They had heard of him through the stories of their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were identified in tribes as the descendants of Israel's sons, but many were only familiar with the gods of Egypt, their attributes, and how they were worshipped. God was about to put his power on display, which was much greater than the limited counterfeit powers of the gods of Egypt. Secondly, they needed to see the total ineptness of the false gods, so they knew not to trust in them once they got to the promised land. The gods of Egypt and the gods of Canaan were going to be prevalent, so the true God had to show that they were useless to worship since they had witnessed that his power was so much greater than any other god. They would want to worship and to serve him alone, since he was the God who, when worshiped correctly, was able to protect, defend, and supply everything they would need. Joshua 24 pretty much lays this out. Verse 14.
Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the God of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And the people answered and said, God forbid that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For the Lord our God, he it is that brought us up out. He it is that brought us up and our fathers out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, and which did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us in all the way wherein we went, and among all the people through whom we passed. And the Lord drave out from before us all the people, even the Amorites which dwelt in the land. Therefore, we will also serve the Lord, for he is our God.
And that lasted until that generation died off, and then the fun started again. But they made a reality. Thus, right now, a spiritual reality show is about to break out in Egypt as to who the true and most powerful God really is. Back to Exodus 7, we'll complete verse 5.
And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch forth mine hand upon Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them. And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them. So did they. And Moses was 80 old, and Aaron 83 old, when they spake unto Pharaoh. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying,
When Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, prove yourself. Come on. You're saying you represent Jehovah. Prove it. Show me a miracle. Then thou shalt say unto Aaron, oh, you want to see something? Watch this. Take your rod, cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. And Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. A serpent, you wish. It became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called his wise men. You guys, wise guys, his so-called experts. Anytime anything happens, on all the news shows, you bring in a dozen experts. So this is what he's doing. Pharaoh brings up his experts, his wise men, and then he also brings the sorcerers or witches. Now, according to Exodus 22:18, which of course hadn't been written yet, it would later state as part of the Mosaic law that God had given to him that thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Witch is the same Hebrew word as sorcerer, those who interact with devil spirits. So all of Pharaoh's sorcerers, all his witches, should be put to death later on, but something's going to happen to them anyway. So verse 11, Pharaoh also called his wise men, he called his experts, he got his witches together. Now he also brings the magicians in. The magicians are the sacred scribes or priests. They were diviners, they were astrologers, they operated magic, they were the magicians of Egypt. They also did in like manner with their enchantments. They had the secret occult arts. They understood what magic spell to use to bring this forth. And Knox translates this, who in their turn uttered secret spells in the Egyptian language, and they did the like. So what happens in verse 12?
For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods.
Thus, the first blow of many on the gods of Egypt was inflicted. The staff symbolized power and protection. Pharaoh's objective by calling in different advisors was to ascertain whether this doing of Aaron's was really a work of divine power or merely a feat of magical art. When Aaron's snakes swallowed up the other snakes, that would have left no doubt as to whether they were using optical illusions or sleight of hands. The magicians of Egypt were renowned for charming serpents. They'd press the nape of the neck in such a way that it would throw the snake into a kind of catalepsy, which rendered them stiff and immovable, and thus seeming to change them from a rod into a snake when revived. It was just an illusion on the senses. However, they did not expect Aaron's snake to eat theirs. Man, you got to train another snake by the next show. Anybody got a snake understudy going on? I need him for the next show. Mine's gone. Geez. Verse 13, and he hardened Pharaoh's heart. So God allows Pharaoh's heart to harden, that he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. Pharaoh probably concluded that Aaron had just pulled off some magical trick that his magicians were not familiar with. God had already warned Moses that this was going to happen. Verse 14.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuses to let the people go. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, he goeth out unto the river. Aramaic idiom for he goes to the latrine.
Right. So when you read, he goes under the water. It's morning time. Pharaoh's heading down to the water. He's going to the latrine. And go ahead and finish the verse, Bob.
And thou shalt stand by the river's brink against he come, and the rod which was turned to a serpent shalt thou take in thine hand.
God told Moses where the Pharaoh would be the next morning, that he was to station himself at the river's edge with a staff in his hand before Pharaoh arrived to relieve himself. Surprise! Man, you guys get out of here. I gotta go. Just a little extra insight. I mean, this had to irritate Pharaoh. All right. Yeah, verse 16. Here, and thou shalt say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has sent me unto thee, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou wouldest not hear. Thus says the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I'm going to smite with the rod that is in my hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that are in the river are going to die, and the river is going to stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink of the water of the river. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, take thy rod, stretch out thy hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon their streams, upon the canals, upon the rivers, the tributaries of the Nile, and upon their ponds, the small lakes or swamps where the reeds grew, and also upon all the reservoirs of water, that they may become blood, and that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and vessels of stone. Stretch out your staff and hand over the waters of Egypt. You got your staff extended over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, the canals, the ponds, the swamps, and all the pools of water, and they'll turn to blood. Blood will be everywhere in Egypt, even in their wooden buckets, pails, stone jars, in the vessels in which the Nile water is kept for daily use, even the stone reservoirs in the corners of the street and other places, used for the poor. See, in my water bottle here, this is what it's like, and now this is what happened to it. Just immediately, all of a sudden, it was clear. I'm not going to take another drink, and there it is. Jeez, it's all blood-like. Verse 20.
And Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded. And he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood.
Whether the water was changed into real blood or only the appearance of it, this was a severe calamity. People all over the whole country of Egypt went to the Nile and would find it not as water, but red as blood. Fishing boats, luxury yachts, pyramid stone transporters, cruise line vessels suddenly find themselves in a river resembling blood instead of water. Now, the first plague was directed against the Nile River, which was the lifeline of the country. There was great reverence for the Nile. It was regarded as a sacred stream and was worshipped as a deity. It was called the father of life, or the father of the gods. And the god Hopi or Hape supervised the annual flooding of the Nile. That was his job. And the god Noom, who, if you've ever seen a picture of Noom, he kind of looks like Bullwinkle the moose. He was the guardian of the sources of the Nile River. With the Nile River turning red like blood, that was a pretty poor representation of their power. All right, verse 21.
And the fish that was in the river died, and the God river stank. And the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, their secret arts. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, neither did he hearken unto them, as the Lord had said. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house, neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about on either side the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the river. And 7 days were fulfilled after that the Lord had smitten the river.
There are serious reservations about the Nile being turned actually into actual blood. The Egyptian magicians were able to repeat the miracle. Seems unlikely the magicians would be able to turn water, right, into literal blood. There's also no mention in the biblical record that God himself reversed the miracle, which would have been necessary if it was real blood. A similar event is described in the papyrus Ipuwer, which we're going to talk more about next week. It's an ancient Egyptian document from the early second millennium. This account implies that the Egyptians had seen red water before, though never at the magnitude the Exodus describes. The Bible's portrayal of the Egyptians' reaction to the Nile's contamination suggests the same thing. Exodus 7:18, second part of the verse said, the Egyptians will find difficulty in drinking water from the Nile. That's the New American Standard Bible translation. They'll find difficulty in drinking the water from the Nile. This can be literally translated as the Egyptians were weary, they were tired out. Hebrew word la'ah, perhaps by digging for water. If the river were really blood, their attitude would probably have been alarm and horror rather than exhortation, exhaustion rather than frustration. The Egyptians knew also what to do to obtain potable water. Exodus 7:24 says they filtered water by digging into the river banks. If the river was literally blood, it could not have been filtered in this way. It seems that what God did to the Nile was what's called a hypernatural miracle. All right. In a hypernatural miracle, God exercises extraordinary control over nature for a particular purpose. He uses natural law and natural phenomena in an extraordinary way to bring about his will rather than acting supernaturally and violating the laws of physics. And I've been talking about this for 20 years where, God has something. He can't go, he doesn't go against the laws of physics. He has something tangible to work off of. Okay. And I never knew they had they had a name for it, hypernatural. Anyway, Psalm 104:4. God makes his angels spirits, his ministers a flaming fire. Psalm 148:8. Fire and hail, snow and vapors, stormy wind, fulfilling his word. These are all things that God does, and he can bring them in the supernatural category. Isaiah 46:10 and 11, New International Version. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times which is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. If I need from the east, I need to summon a bird of prey, I can do it. From a far off land, I can get a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said, that will I bring about. What I have planned, that will I do. Hypernatural miracles encompass extraordinary timing, an extraordinary selection of location, extraordinary magnitude, and or extraordinary selectivity. Hypernaturalism explains many of God's miracles as a combination of divine power and natural law, thereby demonstrating God's total authority over creation. On November 27th, 2012, where were you? Okay. Anyway, there was a headline in the Mail Online that read, tourists in Australia flee as Bondi Beach turns into the Red Sea because of rare algae bloom. Apparently, a rare natural phenomenon had occurred that had turned the famous beach's water red. This is in Australia. The natural phenomena is caused when algae, a plant-like organism, flourishes, and large groups of the minuscule plants, which can appear in various colors, gather together with spectacular results. It's known as nocturnals, scintillans, or sea sparkle. That's a great name for it, sea sparkle. The article included many pictures, and a lifeguard commented that it looked like it had a coating of tomato sauce colored oil. Large numbers of fish were believed to have perished from the effects of the algae. Here is a good picture of, there it is, and there's a bird looking at it going, I ain't going in there. He's right by the whole red thing. And here we have a swimmer. I think I'll go back. Coming up to the red stuff, Yeah, okay, that gives you an idea of what it looked like. Here's another one. There's a kid walking with a stick on the beach, and the water is a little red. So, okay. During the early 1990s, there was extensive fish kill in estuaries in the southeast section of the United States. Researchers found that the fish was being eaten by Pfisteria piscicata. It's an ambush predator dinoflagellate that feasted on the flesh of fish. The fish would leak blood from bleeding ulcerations into the water, giving it a red look that was extremely toxic. Just like God said, the fish would die. Apparently, an algal bloom of dinoflagellate can result and a visible coloration of the water, colloquially known as red tide. There is a rapid increase in the population of algae in an aquatic system producing toxins that are known to remove oxygen from the water. This may be how God allowed the water to be turned into blood. As we proceed through the interrelated plagues, scientific explanations will be put forth for considerations. God uses naturally occurring materials that are already present to supernaturally magnify into miracle status. When the miracle of the feeding thousands from a few loaves and fish was performed, there was something tangible to start with, right? He had bread, he had fish, and he multiplied them out to feed thousands. Okay, so we got one toad, we can have millions. If the blood-like appearance of the Nile during the confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh was indeed due to toxic red algae, the event has all the characteristics of a hyper-natural miracle. It was a natural event that apparently occurred from time to time on the Nile. The only difference was the intensity of the algae invasion. The algae invasion occurred when Moses struck the water with his staff, that is, at the precise time and place to affect God's purpose. Now, another plausible scientific evidence worth considering in aiding the plague's intensity is that at that time there was a massive volcanic eruption that destroyed the Minoan island of Thera, known today as Santeria. It is about 400 miles north of Egypt, and it is thought by some to be the missing city of Atlantis because the whole island vanished quickly. Ongoing diving research has uncovered extreme depths of lava ash tightly piled high in the depths of the water off the volcano's coast. Now, similar ash has been found in Cairo and in the Nile River. From the ashen remains, it has been determined that the plume of the ash cloud, because of how much they have found around the area, the ash cloud that shut the magma up went 20 miles into the stratosphere, blasting out over 30 cubic miles of material, which was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded history. And it ensued what's known as volcanic winter, which coincides with the cold snap that's actually described in the Chinese bamboo or the Jitum annuals. The Tempest Stela of Atmos, found in Egypt, has the earliest known weather report. This stone block has a 40-line inscription dating some 3,500 years ago, which describes rain and darkness, the sky being in storm without cessation, louder than the cries of the masses. It describes unusual weather patterns following after the aftermath of the Thera eruption catastrophe. Volcanoes initiate a volcanic winter, which leads to extreme weather conditions consisting of colder temperatures and more intense storms, which are known to produce unusual hail conditions. Volcanic ash can alter the pH level of rivers like the Nile, which would allow algae to bloom quicker. The sulfuric acid that spews out is so acidic that it ruins crops with its acid rain. In other words, there's a lot of evidence, which people say, oh, there's no evidence of this is just one evidence that a volcano, when it went up, it affected the weather in China. It affected the weather in Egypt. Exodus 8:1.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs or toads. And the rivers shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into thy house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, the driest place, holes in the ground whose sides are plastered with mortar, and into thy kneading troughs.
Kneading troughs are dough pans, where leavening vessels used for making bread. In Palestine, beds were mats or couches that could be moved, but in Egypt, the wealthy had special bed chambers, and they're going to be visited with frogs. Verse 4, rather.
And the frogs shall come up both on thee and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants.
All Pharaoh had to do was to give the order, and Moses would lose his head. He was only separated by the hand of God, not by distance. Moses was protected by God. He was walking with God. A man from a nation of slaves was facing off against an absolute ruler like Pharaoh. Guess who wins? Let's keep reading, verse 5.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt.
We will see that these 10 plagues can be related in sequence. Water turns blood red when contaminated by sulfur, creating a sulfuric acid river. So all the toads invaded the land quickly. Without fish to feed on, the toads' eggs, right? Without fish to feed on, the toads' eggs could multiply real quickly. Many would hatch in the marsh area and quickly abandon the toxic river for land. There's only one word in the Bible used for general sense of frogs and toads. Behavior described here is that of toads. Toads of the genus Bufu are common around the world and have large clusters of eggs. In fact, one individual toad can have hundreds or even thousands of eggs depending on the species. So there could have been millions of frogs in total. And toads are attracted to warmth and light sources. So are insects, which are their food, which happen to be in the houses now, because nothing can be in the river. Egypt is noted for swarms of frogs. The Nile River is cut into many canals which irrigate the fertile Nile Delta area. These canals are cut into smaller ones, and when water is cut off from the smaller canals, it would become stagnant, and because of the heat, frogs swarm and multiply very rapidly. The river is full of them. Egypt, being such a hot land, is an ideal place for the swarms of frogs, flies, and other insects which hatch and grow overnight. Now, this mocked Heket, a goddess pictured in the form of a frog. She was associated with birth and rebirth. One of her functions was to help the dead pharaoh on his journey through the sky. Verse 7.
And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt.
Now, doesn't them bringing up frogs just add to the ministry? Didn't deliver anybody, did it? If the magicians were working for Pharaoh, why would they want more frogs? They must have been working for the adversary. They were mimicking Moses and Aaron by using the power of the adversary. More rightly, the adversary was using them. So here we got a Moses frog. Marley took this frog, so I had to get it back from her. So anyway, but here they are, and here is, the magicians make other frogs. I was just wondering how they could tell them apart. Are some green and some brown, or some bigger than others? How did they know whose was whose? Anyway, verse 8. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people. And I'll let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, glory over me, or explain thyself to me. When shall I entreat for thee, and for thy servants, and for the people, to destroy the frogs from thee and from thy houses, that they may remain in the river only? All right, what he's saying is they're going to go back to the river. Remember, 7 days, it was blood red, had all the acidicness to it, the algae and everything. Now the frogs can go back after 7 days. So he wants to know, you tell me exactly when you want them to leave. So they don't leave by coincidence. Verse 10, what does Pharaoh say?
And he said, tomorrow. And he said, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God.
Of interest was that Pharaoh's magicians could bring them up, but couldn't get rid of them, right? If you were a magician, having, lava and frog eggs and all of that would have been real easy to counterfeit. That one would have been pretty easy. Verse 11.
And the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from thy people. They shall remain in the river only. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the villages, the enclosures, the streets and courts, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank, it reeked. But when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said.
The toads died in heaps. When they died, nothing was there to eat the insects to keep them in check. Thus, it is not surprising to find the next plagues are insect related. Verse 16.
And the Lord said unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt.
There's no warning given for this plague, and that's a pattern for every third plague. Verse 17.
And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, struck the ground, and it became lice in man and in beast. And all the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt.
Now, lice, but not the lice we know today, because these lice attacked men and beast. Today, lice do not attack both. Also, the land conditions weren't right. Lice do not thrive in dry, arid conditions, but rather lice outbreaks are known in more northern latitudes with northern climates. Classification of insects came about with Aristotle about 1,000 years later. He first separated insects into classes like, beetles, flies, rolling stones, things like that. Insects were known in Egypt, but only 100 species were prevalent at that time and could have been translated as lice. The word lice is derived from an Egyptian word meaning mosquito gnat. The midge, which is a gnat-like insect, is extremely small, barely visible. When they bite, itch greatly like lice. The midge bites both man and beast, but only transmits diseases to beasts. The Israelites would not have been affected because the midge is a weak flyer, only about 50 yards max, so they couldn't reach Israel's livestock. Verse 18, and the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. The Eastern text reads, but they could not get rid of them. They brought them up but could not get rid of them. So there was lice upon man and upon beast. This illustrated the limits of their power, and by contrast showed that Moses, God's power, was limitless. They could bring lice forth, but they could not get rid of them. Thus, their limited power. Verse 19.
Then the magician said unto Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said.
It's interesting. This is the finger of God. This is God's direct intervention in human affairs. These lice, the mosquito gnats, the midges, would pollute the priests who spent so much time purifying themselves. Verse 20.
And the Lord said unto Moses, rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water. And say unto him, thus saith the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me.
Like the first plague, God revealed to Moses where Pharaoh was to be early in the morning and told him, get down there before Pharaoh arrived to be. He's on his way down. Oh, and they'll, no, not you again. Jeez. Verse 21.
Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thy houses. And the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are.
By utilizing the figure of speech ellipsis of flies, which is in italics, is all added, but it's supplied. However, it probably was was not limited to just flies only. The Hebrew root shows that they could have been all sorts of insects. The gadfly, the cockroach, the Egyptian beetle, Psalm 78:45 says, he sent divers sorts of flies among them. Many different types of flies, or small creatures really among them, which devoured them, and frogs, which devastated them. Back to Exodus 8:22.
And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. And I will put a division, a redemption between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be. The Lord did so. And there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted, laid waste by reason of the swarm of flies.
By separating out the land of Goshen from the rest of the nation, Moses' powerful God added proof to the Egyptians as well as the children of Israel, that his power was so much greater than the weak gods of the Egyptians. Flies are more abundant than all other pests. It's doubtful, though, it was the testy fly because they're very tropical in nature, needing a lot of rainfall. And probably not black flies because they do not swarm and only increase gradually. Couldn't have been the horsefly because even though its bite is painful, it's highly unusual to have the numbers needed for this plague. But the stable fly fits perfectly. Its population can explode enormously. They bite and hurt, leaving open wounds and get infected. Feces from animals like cattle and horses that lived in the area would make the conditions right for this type of insect, especially with rotting vegetation or dead fish and toads in heaps. Their 1 mile range would keep them from the livestock of the Israelites. This plague was another severe blow to all idolatrous worship and worshipers. Cleanliness was imperative. For this cause, the priests wore linen and shaved daily. Moreover, it mocked the worship of that chit, the fly god, to mark his impotence. The worship of flies, particularly of the beetle, was a prominent part of the religion of the ancient Egyptians. The employment of these winged deities to chastise them must have been painful and humiliating to the Egyptians, while it must at the same time have strengthened the believing of the Israelites in the God of their fathers as their only object of worship. Verse 25.
And Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron and said, Go, ye, service or sacrifice to your God in the land.
This is Pharaoh's first attempt at getting Moses to compromise. The land of Goshen was where they were currently residing. Pharaoh agreed to let them hold their sacrifice there, but Moses knew what God's plan really was. Verse 26.
And Moses said, It is not meet to do so, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and will they not stone us?
Yeah, the Egyptians would have been offended at seeing their sacred animal sacrificed to the God of the Israelites. They would have been an insult to the Egyptian deities. Hathor, the cow goddess, and Apis, the bull god, were greatly revered in Egypt. And you're going to sacrifice them right in their face? It's like when you go to India, there's cows everywhere. You can't touch them. They get really mad, the Hindus do, when Muslims, do something to those cows. So that's a great example here. So no, we can't do that, Pharaoh. Verse 27.
We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God, as he shall command us. And Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that ye may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only ye shall not go very far away. Entreat or plead for me. And Moses said, Behold, I go out from thee, and I will entreat the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants or officers, and from his people tomorrow. But let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully any more in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord.
Moses trusted and relied on God and not on anyone else. He listened to and heeded God every step of the way. It's kind of funny that there's been no more mention of brick quotas, is there? Since we started all of this. Exodus 8:30.
And Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. The Lord did according to the word of Moses, and he removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh and from his servants and from his people. There remained not one. And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also, neither would he let the people go.
Exodus 9:1.
Then the Lord said unto Moses, Go in unto Pharaoh, and tell him, Thus saith the Lord God of the Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me. For if thou refuse to let them go, and wilt hold them still, behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thy cattle, or your livestock, which is in the field, upon the horses, upon the asses, upon the camels, upon the oxen, upon the sheep. There shall be a grievous murrain or pestilence.
A very grievous one. And the fifth plague was aimed at all kinds of animal worship. Verse 4 says, And the Lord shall sever between the cattle or livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt. And there shall nothing die of all that is in the children of Israel. And the Lord appointed a set time, saying, Tomorrow the Lord shall do this in the land. Meanwhile, cattle futures traded wildly in the Egyptian stock market today. Oh man, back and forth. Got milk? Not for long. And the Lord did that thing on the morrow. And all the livestock, the most useful domesticated animals of Egypt, died. But of the livestock of the children of Israel, died not even one. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, go up there and tell me what's going on. Not one of the livestock of the Israelites were dead, and the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. Now, this was a grievous pestilence on animals only. Now, African horse sickness is a virus that attacks horses, mules, donkeys, but not cattle, sheep, or goats. This virus grows in cells that line the blood vessels and deteriorates them rapidly, causing fluid that's in the blood to get trapped in the animal's lungs, and the animals literally choke on their own bodily fluids. But there's a related sickness called blue tongue disease, which attacks cattle, sheep, and goats in much the same way. A lack of oxygen causes the animals' tongues to turn blue. Both blue tongue disease and African horse sickness, or some variation of them working together, could have caused this plague. Both are easily transported by midges. Since the midge doesn't fly very far, the children of Israel's livestock were safe from this plague. Verse 8.
And the Lord said unto Moses and unto Aaron, take to you handfuls of ashes of the furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh.
Certain Eastern magicians would pronounce spells on individuals or a village or even a country. They'd take ashes of cow dung or those from a common fire and they'd throw them into the air and saying in the objects of displeasure, such a sickness or such a curse shall surely come upon you. Now, this plague, like the third and ninth, was without any warning. It was just done in Pharaoh's sight. He must have known the meaning of the sprinkling ashes into the air. Verse 9.
And it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt.
Boils and blains were to be the result of the ashes from the kiln, affecting both humans and animals. In the London Museum, there's an old medical papyrus that prescribed alkaline drugs as the remedy for a severe outbreak of skin problems like boils caused by extreme acidic waters, like from the ash from a volcano. Animals that have not been in the field hadn't been affected yet. There is a bacterial infection called glanders that affects both humans and animals, causing boils and can be transmitted by the stable fly. It affects horses, camels, oxen, pigs, and humans. It is a chronic progressive disease that can lead to death. The Israelites were without the 1 mile radius range that the staple fly can travel. In Wilson's Old Testament word studies, boils are defined as inflamed spots, inflammation, eruption, a burning sore, and ulcer. Deuteronomy 28 is the chapter that discusses the consequences of not keeping the Mosaic law. This chapter is known as the curse of the law. And from Deuteronomy 28, Bob will read verses 27 and 35.
The Lord will smite thee with the botch, the boils of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of thy foot unto the top of thy head.
Hezekiah was on his deathbed while suffering from this before he got healed by the Lord. 2 Kings 20, verse 7.
And Isaiah said, take a lump of figs. And they took and laid it on the boil, the botch, the inflammation, and he recovered.
He would have died from this physical problem since it was so severe. It definitely has ties to leprosy. The context of when this word is used in Leviticus is leprosy. Exodus 9:9.
And it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon men and upon beasts throughout all the land of Egypt.
Whatever the boils exactly were, they certainly were painful. And they had blains too. Blains is used twice in the Bible, here in verses 9 and 10 only. And they are defined as blisters, boils, and inflamed tumors upon the body. It comes from the root word meaning to swell, from insect bites, infections, and other open wounds. Verse 10.
And they took ashes of the furnace, or the kiln or oven, and stood before Pharaoh. And Moses sprinkled it upward, and sprinkled it up toward heaven. And it became a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast.
Ashes of the kiln was one of the altars on which human sacrifices were sometimes offered to appease the Egyptian god Typhon or Seth. In India, it's called Shiva. He is the nasty god called the evil principle or the evil divinity, the god of wind and storms, chaos and disorder. Sacrifices were doubtless being made to avert the plagues, and Moses, using the ashes in the same way, produced another plague instead of averting it. Verse 11.
And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boil was upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians, all the land of Egypt.
Probably a lot of Pharaoh's court called in sick that day, huh? The Egyptian god of healing and medicine was mocked here. The term magic means to magnify, to deceive the eye. The Egyptian magicians performed many wonders in the presence of Pharaoh, so the king gave little credence to the wonders which Moses and Aaron performed. That's why Pharaoh refused to let the children of Israel leave. But the superiority of Moses' wonders over the wonders of the Egyptians for a while was not sufficient to convince Pharaoh that God had sent Moses to Egypt to lead his people. Since the magicians themselves now became stricken, they recognized Moses' superiority over them. Their deceptive powers were no match for the God of Moses. Verse 12.
And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had spoken unto Moses.
Moses was persistent because God had given him a charge and his promises every time the Lord spoke. Moses then would faithfully believed it and faithfully carried it out. Whatever God told him to do, he faithfully did it. Verse 13.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God of the Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me.
God allowed a day of suffering with boils and blains before sending Moses in to talk to Pharaoh.
For I will at this time send all my plagues upon thine heart, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, that thou mayest know that there is none like me in all the earth. For now I will stretch out my hand, that I may smite thee and thy people with pestilence, and thou shalt be cut off from the earth. And in very deed for this cause I have raised thee up, preserved thee, for to show in thee my power, that my name may be declared throughout all the earth.
Pharaoh, because of his pride and greed, was unwilling to let the Hebrews leave Egypt. There was also political and economic reasons for stubbornness. The Hebrews were a Semitic people, and Semitic people constantly warred against the Egyptians. They were called derogatorily, the sand ramblers. They were also a cheap source of labor to utilize for digging canals and building cities for Pharaoh. Now, word of what was happening in Egypt started to get around via the trade caravans, sojourners, traveling salesmen, sand ramblers. Corporate strategies are now changing. Maybe we should increase our trade with Nineveh, with the Hittites for a while. Verse 17, As yet exaltest thou thyself against my people, that thou wilt not let them go? Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as hath not been in Egypt since the foundations, or even until now. With protein from fish and livestock in trouble, grain, the cereal crop, would become the next target.